in many places in the Bible, you will come across Jesus referred to as the only begotten of the Father, or one and only Son. But you're going to notice as well in the Old Testament and in the New Testament that there are many places where biblical authors tells us that God has many children. Take, for example, Genesis 6. It says here, when man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Now, you move to verse 4, it also says here, there were Nephilim in those days. And also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. So, as you can see here, there is the presence of these heavenly beings, and I'm not making this up. And I think a lot of the Christians nowadays are also exposed to the idea that these are angelic beings, because in the book of Enoch there is actually an allusion to these sons of God as angels or angelic beings or the children of the heaven. You can find this in chapter 6 of of Enoch. Now, there's also an allusion to sons of God in Deuteronomy chapter 32. I'm reading from the ESV version. It says here, remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you, your elders, and they will tell you. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the people according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted heritage. So the idea here is that when God divided the nations back in Genesis 10 and 11, now he assigned sons of God to rule over them, to, sort of look after them, right? But then you go to Psalm 82, it tells us that God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. So I think this is the same group of divine beings that God is judging at this time. He was saying to them, he was telling them, how long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Give justice to the weak and the fatherless, maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute, right? So on and on. And then you go to verse 6 of Psalm 82. It says here, I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die and fall like any prince. So the idea here was that these sons of God who were assigned to the people were not doing their job. And God is telling them to straighten out their act, because, just like men, they're going to fall, right? God is issuing a warning to these sons of God. Now, let's move to the New Testament, where you're going to notice that there are a lot of passages that talks about believers considered to be the sons of God. You see that in Galatians chapter 3, 26, Romans chapter 8, 16, verse to verse 17, right? So it is also mentioned here that Adam was the son of God in Luke chapter 3, verse 38. Now, let me just read this passage, Galatians chapter 3, verse 26. It says here, for in Christ Jesus, you are all sons of God through faith, right? So if only begotten doesn't mean only son, right? As we've mentioned, as we have seen in the passages, what could this mean? Now, we first need to understand what begotten is, the word used here, right? So if you go through the Bible and you do a word search for the word begotten, you're going to notice that a couple of interpretations will come up with that same word being used in the English. One of those interpretation is the normal way on how we understand it, which is an offspring, right? The second one, like in the passage of Philemon, verse 10, Philemon chapter 1, verse 10, it says here, I beseech thee for my son Onesimus, whom I have begotten in my bond. So this tells us that Onesimus was a result of the work of Paul. of his ministry, it doesn't mean to say that Paul gave birth to Onesimus. Now, there's another type of usage, which is special status. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 17. It says here, by faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac. And he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son. See, it's different. Now, if you think that Isaac was the only son, then you got a problem, because Abraham had many sons. Namely, you got Ishmael, and there are other sons from his wife Keturah. No, so he had many sons. So it couldn't be Isaac. This phrase couldn't mean that Isaac was the only son. So what does it mean? Right? So you go to, if you check out the word used here for begotten, it's the word in Greek monogenes. Monogenes means one of a kind. It means unique. It doesn't mean only. It doesn't mean one and only. It means unique among the rest. You know, there's something about this particular son that is different from the rest. Okay, so you read passages just like John chapter 3, verse 16, where it tells us that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. It's the same word, monogenes. You go to verse 18 of the same chapter. It says here, he that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. Again, you see the same word, monogenes. The same goes in John chapter 1, verse 18. The only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father. Same word, monogenes. Same word as well in 1 John chapter 4, verse 9. Well, it says, because that God sent his only begotten Son into the world that we might live through him. Monogenes. Once again, the same word comes up again and again when it talks about the only begotten, right? So if Jesus wasn't the only son, what's so unique about this son, right? So this is where we dive into John chapter 1. There are actually other passages where it tells us about the uniqueness of Jesus, but let's just focus on John chapter 1, because it says here, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, right? And you go to John chapter 1, verse 14, it tells you who this Word, or what happened to the Word. It says here, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory as of the only Son from the Father. Again, only Son, the same word, monogenes, full of grace and truth, it says here. So it means to say that this Son is special. He holds a special status because he is God himself in the flesh. He is the Yahweh of the Old Testament that appears in the New Testament. So I hope you liked the video, and thanks. God bless.